is an informal settlement called Langrut. The site we're going to come back to just now is what we're working on. I'm going to fly you over Langrut a little bit. We started working here, my colleague Neil Armitage and I, way back in about 2006, 2007. We found people that had been living in this area for 20, 25 years, waiting, resilient, patiently for a house, and in the meantime, living in very dysfunctional services. Of the 45 different informal settlements that we examined at the time in terms of water and drainage, this was probably one of the worst we'd seen, with very, very poor services. Water that came, grey water and sewage as well, sewage rather, came into this river called the Stibbable River and flows downhill in a very degraded river that has lost all of its ecological services that it could provide. We fly past this situation and go into, literally across the other side of the road, into a complete contrast of wealthy farmers who sell wine and water. And here we go along the river. There's lots of interesting, there's a railway line along here. The tourists come into this area by the bucket load. One of the farms just down the road over here is attracting 25,000 visitors every year. And we're going to turn the corner a little bit over here with this little drone that's flying around for us and go along the river, which is in a slightly better condition because rivers are able to, because nature is able to restore rivers. And we get into the site that we're coming to right now. And the site is going to explode into a model that we're trying to create right now. That's the site probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We've done lots even subsequently. The beds that you see in the beginning over here are now becoming our new biofiltration plants, filters rather. That's what it looks like. So just a quick overview for the moment of what it's going to look like in hopefully 5 years' time, with about 80 to 100 million rand to come into it. And here is the pieces of the site, the biofiltration cells, which will be taking water from both stormwater and the river, cleaning it out through nature and through the substrate, and returning it back to the river initially, and also returning it back to a wetland. We'll be treating stormwater, some through wetlands and ponds on the right-hand side. This is my first researcher. This is Sibeli's new home. He lives in it completely off the grid, and he's just moved in there over this last weekend. Worked very hard to get him into there. Down below here, we're now about to go into the new research laboratory. This is existing infrastructure, and we're going to sort of modify it a little bit, but we're interested in understanding more about the biofilm that is formed around the roots of crops. How does nature treat water? And these are skills and these are areas both the microbiologists in this room and others would be interested to have a look and see what we're trying to do here in this laboratory. Bit of a long way to go before we get to this, but we certainly want to make sure that our science and our technology is brought right onto the site to demonstrate that as well. And because we're interested in food, we want to see if we can breed fish in that as a food stock. And on the right hand side, for the chemical engineers in particular, we want to be able to extract resources from that algae. Lots of opportunities there. And then the water that's treated further up the site eventually finds its way into a biodiversity pond. Not a wastewater pond, but a biodiversity pond which is enhanced through the vegetation and also the treatment further upstream. I have to say that Franschhoek also is the wedding capital of this country and also the foodie capital of the country. So they claim. They market themselves incredibly well. And so we've got to do likewise. And because we're looking for a model, a financial model that actually is able to support research and institutional research, we've got to look towards ways of marketing the site as well. I'll come to that in a moment. Our first major challenge is partly those biofiltration beds, but also to rehabilitate this river, which is in a shocking condition. And because it's about food too, we want to be able to make sure that we're learning new ways to produce food in an urban environment. To make it easy, yeah, everyone can grow food, and there's lots of ways of growing it, but how do we actually improve our ability to bring water to that area? These are the two think tanks, and these are going to stay on the site. These are an income generating opportunity. First of all, in a restaurant, adding to the many other restaurants that are in there, in Franschhoek, those who know it. and see some of the infrastructure that's actually part of those tanks right now that we will try and keep in there. And then we're going to go around to have a look at the exhibition centre, and now you can see where it's all going to. That it will eventually become a conference centre that's able to take about 250 people in that area. We're about 60 kilometres from Cape Town, so it's fairly ideal to do that. And that's what it looks like above. These are green roofs on top of the building, all new technologies, all new ways of understanding of how we actually work with green technologies and green infrastructure. And inside on the top floor, from the wonderful view around, is the conference centre. And then the next part, as we go over it, are the supporting buildings to that conference centre. And what we're trying to do here is to help draw in the new technologies that are emerging in water. And so we want to create a space where private entrepreneurs, private sector, can bring their technologies that they're still in very embryonic stage and test them out here. And here we bring the universities closer to the whole exercise, where universities might be able to endorse research alongside those technologies. For too long, we're talking about some private sector and entrepreneur out there who's getting very little assistance to bring that particular product to the market and to add value. That's our struggle. We're not getting it to the marketplace. These are the homes we are constructing, the homes made in a particular way, which enables researchers and workers on site to narrow the gap in terms of the learning, to have different researchers from different disciplines to suddenly work together on a project. And these houses are built with different materials. We will demonstrate them. We will hold workshops on the site. We'll have weekend workshops, which helps you to know how to build an affordable house that is off the grid and is reasonably affordable at any rate. And that's, again, the site looking at the top of it over there. So you can see what we've been trying to do, both in terms of the streams of water flowing through the system. And then we are a research, demonstration and training and innovation centre. We are gathering our partners as we go. The project initially was given some support from the Western Cape government, and we've got the land from the Stellenbosch municipality, and we are gathering, and UWC should also be on that as well. You've just joined us in terms of the groundwater, and we've now got a website as well. And so I want to finish by just going back to the PowerPoint presentation and just make one or two final points in terms of where that all is going. I won't worry about that slide, but here the final kind of messages as far as if it hasn't come across clearly enough. So the list of skills and the progress towards trying to fulfill those skills are a necessary endeavour in South Africa. But I think even as we speak, and even as we plant more names and more categories on the list, and even as we struggle to put resources into generating that, the boat's moved on already. It's moving very quickly. The technology is moving very quickly, and the demands in this country are urgent. And the lists are all well and good, but it's very hard to try and keep creating these categories and supplying funds for a particular category. The point I'm trying to make too, in my sectors that I spoke about early on, is that it look differently to the way the skills are being unpacked on the ground. When you take students out of the classroom and you put them into a site like the Water Hub, suddenly the skills become less a category than an actual way to work together to solve those problems. And people come out of those disciplines and start to learn to work together. And it's conflictual as well as it is towards solving the problem. And we're not scared to raise those conflicts. We're not scared to have a social scientist working with a chemical engineer, and likewise, because that's the way we're going to probably solve some of these very complex problems that we're facing with. There are just 4 points here. Here's number 2. The training needs to shift from the sort of cerebral to the practical. And that's the comment I made early on. Our universities might look very different in the years to come. And maybe we should say that's a blessing. Perhaps we might see that the way in which our universities are being funded in the future is going to look very different, and that we're going to look for alternatives. And the example I'm trying to give you here is maybe here's a satellite university sitting elsewhere, which is not akin to a particular name. It is an amalgamation of research institutes that doesn't push out degrees, but puts out certification and the opportunities for people to build business and build their jobs and their confidence in playing around with the water sector. And it's when I say not likely playing around, but to experiment with confidence and with knowledge that's already been generated, that's been passed on by researchers, so that we can build our confidence. Investment in training centres, I think, are critical for the water sector. I really do. And we've done so little of them so far. And we've got to find ways to try and do that. I presented you one case for where I think the model might go, where business and enterprise comes together, finds other ways to fund that. It's a clever way of doing it, and it should work in that situation. It's not going to work in all situations. But perhaps we've got to get back to the idea of how do we fund practical research and enable people not to have to go through 4 years of hell being an engineer, but actually go through something which enables them to actually get a leg up into the profession, into the sector. I'm not knocking engineers, by the way, because they've got a role to play. I'm just saying there may be alternatives out there we need to explore. And certification at a different level might be something we should be looking at. And then last of all, the water sector is so boring. It really is. If the accountants can find that they can get actively mobile, what the hell are we doing in our sector to inspire a new generation? I don't know where it is. But I think our students need to see that there's something exciting happening out there. And for me, what is exciting when students start to work on the Water Hub, for instance, is one of these inspiring sides. How do we do things, not necessarily throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and not necessarily saying it's all about being unconventional and alternative, and we're going to find alternative water sources in this way. What it is saying is that keep your head about you. Let's see if we can learn from where we are, but maybe we've got to start stretching some of that creativity and that experimentation and get more excited about what could be offered. So the byline in the Water Hub is, how do we inspire? We're inspiring a new generation. It's bringing together both development and research so that we can start to address some of these critical challenges. And of course, I have to add, last of all, we can only do a small amount over here. But if we can get similar kinds of centres up and running, and the motivation and influence from the universities that are core to that region, maybe we could start to make a difference, and maybe we could start to bring students into this who will not fear the fact that I haven't got an engineering degree and therefore I can't step into this space. But there is a large amount of opportunities that are there that might be useful to us. So thank you. I hope that sort of stimulated a little bit, and I look forward to further discussion.